Hey everybody, my name is Mike Montgomery, and in today's video I'd like to show you how I built this completely DIY mini kitchen along this 6-foot stretch of wall on Modern Builds. Today's video is made possible by Squarespace. Go to squarespace.com/modernbuilds for your free trial and to build your own custom website. So today we're back in Oklahoma City at my parents' place in the room that I converted from an attic into a home theater room last year. That project was a ton of fun, and in this space we've got about 30 or 35 square feet of empty space along the back of the room. And instead of just utilizing this for storage, I thought it would be awesome to create this mini kitchen. That way it would be easier and more fun to entertain in this space for my parents. Now I know that this space isn't super common, but I thought this idea would be really convenient for anybody that's got a small studio apartment or some sort of unique space that they want to get a little more functionality out of. So let's go ahead and get this project started.
I built the cabinets for this kitchen out of 3/4-inch birch plywood from Home Depot, and here you can see me ripping it down to 18-inch wide strips. The standard depth for lower kitchen cabinets are 24 inches deep, but because I was in such a narrow space, I cut mine to 18 inches deep just to conserve a little bit of room.
So this is the Craig ACS in full transformer mode. I've got the project table here set up with the track saw ready to go, but I've also got this entire 4x8 assembly table. This is gonna give me room to assemble all of my cabinets with a really flat reference surface. It's also gonna act as outfeed support since I'm breaking down full 4x8 sheets. And I wanna be upfront, I'm not saying that the Craig ACS is the perfect solution for everybody, but it's amazing for this 2-car garage workshop at my parents' place back home in Oklahoma City. So if you are interested in learning more about the Craig ACS, I'll be sure to leave a couple of links down in the description. Thanks guys.
As I use the ACS more and more, I really enjoy it for breaking down plywood projects. Doing these wide crosscuts, which I would typically use a circular saw and a straight edge for, are really convenient, and it's nice to have that outfeed support and a really clean cut that the track saw provides. And if you plan on building this project or something similar, I'll leave a link down in the description to my website where I've got free PDF plans for the kitchen that I built. No, I'm sure your space is going to be a little bit different than mine, but I'll have some basic cut lists and diagrams. That way you're sure to be able to build this with no problems. And after gluing and clamping my pieces square, I used my 16-gauge finish nailer to lock everything and hold it in place while the glue dried. I used these 2 offcuts to create the top piece of the cabinet. Now this is going to add a little bit of access in the middle of the cabinet, which you'll see me using later. Not to mention, it made use of what would have been waste material. The 2 internal dividers are inset 3/4 of an inch from the outside face of the cabinet, and you can see these 2 pieces of scrap plywood that I used to create a consistent offset. I used my 12-inch speed square to make sure I was installing everything straight, and once again, my 16-gauge finish nailer to lock everything down. At this point, the case was getting a lot more rigid. Adding those 2 internal dividers did a lot, but to add a little bit more strength, I grabbed some corner braces that I attached to the back corners of the cabinet on all 4 sides.
The next thing I need to do is build the drawer boxes, and instead of using more of this birch plywood that I just bought, I'm going to use scrap plywood that I've got laying around and see how many of the drawers I can make.
The first thing I needed to do was rip all of these boards to a consistent width, so I grabbed my repetitive stops, set them to cut 6 inches wide, and then cut all of my scrap pieces to the same width. Once that was complete, I set the depth gauge on my track saw to 1/2 of an inch, and I cut a groove on the bottom edge of all of these boards that the bottom of the drawer is going to set into eventually. Of course, I cleaned all of these up with a chisel really quick and then cut my pieces to their final length. Assembling the drawers this way means that one of the rabbet joints, the grooves on the bottom of the drawers, is eventually going to be exposed, but I make sure that that faces out where the drawer face is eventually going to attach and hide that groove. Then I cut some 1/8-inch plywood for the bottoms of these drawers, glued and nailed those in place as well, and the drawers were complete. The cabinets I built have 3 drawers total. The top 2 are 6 inches deep, which I figured would be nice for silverware and other small kitchen utensils, while the bottom drawer is 12 inches deep and it can hold bigger things like small kitchen appliances. And finally, the last step for these drawers was to install some soft close ball bearing sliders and make sure that everything fit.
So normally this is where I would attach my drawer faces as well as my cabinet door to this case, but I'm dealing with really tight margins between all of these door faces. So we're gonna go ahead and take this cabinet up into the attic, that way we can lock it into place perfectly square before we install any of these drawer faces.
After checking to make sure everything was level and square, I grabbed some scrap wood blocks that I tied into the studs behind the wall and then screwed the cabinet into. Something I've been wanting to try for a while is what I'm calling integrated cabinet pulls. Instead of installing hardware on top of the drawers or on top of the cabinet doors, it's marking and cutting shapes into the actual door, which gives a really unique, modern look. I don't see a ton of people DIYing this technique, so I wanted to give it a try. I just used a jigsaw with a clean cutting blade and used a sandpaper block to smooth out all of my cuts, and I was really happy to see that it came out looking awesome. I used these strips of wood that were about 1/8 of an inch thick to make sure my reveals were consistent around all of my drawers and cabinet faces. I just put my pieces in place, used some Maker brand F-style clamps to hold them in place, and then screwed them from the back of the cabinet. I was really happy to see that the first drawer installed great, and so I used the same steps to install the top two. And down in the description, I'll leave a link below to these Maker brand F-style clamps if you're interested in checking them out. And earlier in the video when I mentioned it was convenient to have the hole in the top of the cabinet, this is why. I didn't plan for it, but I was really happy that I had an access point to be able to screw this top drawer face in. At this point, I was all out of the birch plywood I had already broken down, so I grabbed a new sheet and I cut my cabinet door out of that. And anytime that I'm cross-cutting plywood, I try to remember to use painter's tape where I'm cutting to prevent any chip out. And even though they're not sponsoring this video, Rockler has sponsored a lot of videos of mine in the past. They make incredible installation tools and jigs, and this is one of them. This is their deluxe concealed hinge drilling system, and it effectively converts your drill into a drill press so that you drill perfectly straight holes in the perfect position. This system costs about $100, which I'll leave linked in the description. If you ever plan on drilling a lot of these holes or installing a lot of this hardware, I definitely recommend it. After that, I could move to cutting the integrated handle on the door face, just like I did on the cabinet pulls. These pulls are 6 inches wide with a 15-degree angle on each edge, but don't worry, I'll leave all of this in the plans linked down in the description, so make sure and check those out. These bloom hinges that I used have a ton of adjustability, but it's still important to make sure that you install everything as close to perfect as you can from the get-go. And I was genuinely surprised to see that I didn't have to adjust the door at all.
Our next step is to install the mini fridge, and I got this one for about $250 on Amazon. It was a great deal, and it's a really awesome shape. I'm excited to see what this thing looks like. Wow. So yeah, it looks like a Smeg, but hey, it's a cool retro vibe at a really great cost. And to make everything look even more custom, I want to create this panel that'll go on the inside of the cabinet that follows the shape of the fridge. So I just marked the shape of the fridge on that panel and then cut it about 1/4 of an inch oversize on every face on the ACS, using a jigsaw to clean up all of the corners. And being able to safely plunge cut on the track saw like this is one of those cool advantages that the ACS have that they don't necessarily advertise. As I install this panel, you can see that I cheated everything to the left a little bit, and that's just to make sure that the door has plenty of room to swing open and not catch that outside edge of the cabinet. But man, that looks so cool. I used iron-on birch edge banding to cover up the exposed plywood on the outside of the cabinets. I really wasn't worried about the exposed plywood on the cabinet pulls or the cabinet door, but I just wanted to make sure everything was clean from the outside facing edges. Then I grabbed some Gator 220 grit sandpaper and sanded everything clean to prep for finish.
And I used 2 coats of water-based polyurethane, the same finish that I used on the DIY plywood floors to match.
Really quickly, before moving on, I'd like to give a big thanks to this video's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is the best place for you to build your own website, and the best part is you don't need any website building experience. Squarespace's library of built-in designer templates look amazing right out of the box, and all you need to be able to do to edit your website is drag and drop images and edit and move text blocks. If you're a maker, you can use Squarespace to create a portfolio. That way potential clients can find your work and decide whether or not they want to work with you. Or if you want to sell items online, there is no limit to the number of items that you can sell online on your own Squarespace site. Setting up a store is super convenient, and the checkout process for your customers couldn't be easier. And right now, if you follow my link down in the description, that's squarespace.com/modernbuilds, you can get a free trial and build your own Squarespace site without putting in any of your credit card info. And then whenever it's time for your site to go live, make sure and use the code modernbuilds at checkout for 10% off.
I was planning on doing white concrete counters for this project, but my first attempt unfortunately failed. But then I remembered
I had these IKEA countertops that I picked up from the clearance section a couple years ago for about 20 bucks. Just in case you didn't believe me. I actually used one of these in my first bathroom renovation video. This was a bathroom remodel under $500. I'll leave linked below. And thinking back, the white countertop with the silver edge is gonna look perfect in this space.
Obviously, this counter is way too big for the kitchen I have planned, so I need to cut it down. So I created this template using strips of MDF hot glued into place, which are going to scribe that back wall, which isn't perfectly straight. Then I can transfer those marks onto my counter and cut it in place. Anytime you cut laminate counters, you want to make sure and do it upside down. That way the laminate doesn't chip out. Instead, any chip out will be on the bottom of the cabinets. And because I had such tight margins, I wanted to cut the opening for the sink with the cabinet facing up. I just made sure to use painter's tape once again to help prevent chip out. After that was done, I grabbed a hole saw to cut the opening for the faucet. In standard kitchens, counters overhang the cabinets by about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. But once again, I'm in a narrow space, so my reveal is only about 1/4 inch.
So I'm really happy with how all of this looks. I think these countertops are awesome. The white and silver look pairs with all of the fixtures perfect. The only problem though is I've got another really white wall behind this whole kitchen. So I picked up these. These are peel and stick wallpaper, and I got one in white and silver and one in white and gold. Both of them are the same hexagon pattern, which should pair with the floors really nicely. And now that I got a chance to see them both in person, I think I'm gonna use the white and gold hexagons and return the white and silver ones to Amazon. I'll leave links to both down in the description.
To prep the wall, I grabbed a Gator 120 grit drywall sponge and I sanded down the texture as much as I could. I wasn't going for a perfectly flat wall, but I wanted to get all of the high points of the texture taken down, that way everything would adhere a little bit better. After that, I grabbed a wet cloth to get rid of the majority of the dust that was left on the wall, and then I opened up a Gator tack cloth, which is going to get the rest of that fine dust out of the way, once again to ensure good adhesion. My next step was to measure and mark a line in the center of the wall as perfectly straight as I could get. This is going to be my reference line for installing my first piece of wallpaper, and from there, every seam is going to reference that. I was really thankful to have my mom there on this step to give me a hand installing these pieces of wallpaper. These sort of tedious tasks are not my specialty, and having her there to make sure everything went smoothly was definitely to my benefit. Overall, this peel and stick wallpaper installed easily. I was happy to see that. It laid down flat, was easy to peel up and adjust if we needed to, and we used a clean, dry erase board marker as a squeegee to help smooth out any inconsistencies. I did make a small error in cutting my pieces, as you can see, and I left a little opening in the top right corner of my wallpaper, but we were able to patch that up, and honestly, you can barely see a seam. Unless you're looking for it, it totally disappears. And I'm sure this isn't the proper technique, but I just used a clean, sharp utility knife to edge up all of my corners. now that the quote-unquote backsplash is in, I can permanently install my counters, and to do that, I just screwed from the underside of the cabinets into the countertop. After that, I use silicone kitchen adhesive to seal the back edge of the countertop, as well as to install my sink basin. And just like every other product I've used, I will leave Amazon links in the description if you're interested in checking out the products that I used. I really love this sink. And if you're new to my channel, I want to give a quick disclaimer. I am by no means a professional plumber, electrician, tradesman, or anything like that. I am a DIYer just like you guys, so don't take my advice when it comes to plumbing, but I am going to show you exactly what I did. After using plumber's putty to seal and install my sink strainer, I could deal with all of the plumbing underneath the cabinets. There were already plumbing rough-ins in this room from when my parents built the house long ago. There's a bathroom on the other side of the wall, and it's all tied into that. All I needed to do was PVC cement a short section of 2-inch pipe so that I could install a wall mount adapter to bring everything down to 1.5" PVC, which is the standard for sinks where I'm from. After that, I could install my J-trap and connect it to the strainer. And fair warning, this flexible J-trap I used, which was really convenient to help everything line up, isn't code everywhere, but I was able to use it and it worked great for me. I used these push-to-connect shark bite adapters with built-in valves to convert the hot and cold lines to the 1/2" threaded that I needed to connect the faucet. These adapters are amazing for DIYs because unlike other PEX connections, you don't need a crimping tool and they're really easy to install in tight spaces. Then I added some thread sealant and could connect all of my fittings.
Here we go, moment of truth. Oh yeah! And the drain is working. Oh man, it works.
With the plumbing complete, I can move on to my final steps, which is installing floating shelves on the back wall of the kitchen. Now, I made a full tutorial on this project. If you're interested in checking that out, as always, links will be down in the description. This video was just getting a little bit too long to add a whole nother project into it. I just tied the brackets that I built into the 2x4s behind the wall and could slip the floating shelves over those brackets. Then after adding ventilation to the fridge compartment, I could install all of my appliances, peel the protective layer from the edge of these countertops, and this kitchen was complete. Finally. So I really couldn't be more excited with how this project came out. I've done bathroom and kitchen renovations in the past, but I had never built something like this from scratch, and it was really cool to see it all come together. I think the clean, modern look that the cabinets have is amazing, and I love those integrated handles. It was something that I've been wanting to try for a long time, and I was really happy to see how easy they were to DIY. The fridge, the sink, the faucet all pair together really nicely, and I love that peel and stick backsplash with the floating shelves. And I know that this is a little bit of an out-of-the-box project, or at least an out-of-the-box shape, but I really hope that this may give you the confidence to try something similar in a space that suits you. And as always, free plans are linked down in the description.
So one more huge thanks for checking out today's video. If you enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that thumbs up button and click subscribe and the notification bell if you haven't already. That way you can stay updated every time I post new videos. I had a ton of fun building these projects and they were a real test of my abilities. The home renovation content that I've been doing lately is really becoming my favorite. It's definitely not as easy, but it's a lot more rewarding to see things come to life at this scale. If you want to keep up with me throughout the week, you can do that at Modern Builds. I post stories almost every day. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and we'll see you next time on Modern Builds.